what I'm going to encourage you to do is to try to tune into the sort of attention from yourself that your body wants, because a lot of trauma is relational with people. A very, very common issue with people with chronic conditions is that they have forgotten how to honor that intuitive sense of things, which is actually part of what perpetuates these conditions. Hi, I'm Michael Westgate. Thank you for joining me. I've helped people with chronic pain for over 2 decades. I aim to help you say goodbye to pain and hello to a fully lived life. I want to talk about a little bit more about the science. I'm doing my best to make all these things very relatable. And the reason I'm saying that is that my experience is that people that understand this, the basic science, get better quicker and stay better, because part of what is in the way of us getting better are certain constructs that are in the ecosystem of our science and other orientations that is actually incorrect when it comes to trying to solve these things. It doesn't really serve. And that's what we're going to talk about right now. So the title of this session was kind of moving behind the machine model and into relational healing, the approach. And that's what polyvagal theory talks about, is that whether it's between ourselves, our conscious mind and our body, or us and others, there is this reciprocal, ideally at least, rhythm that has to be established, a relationship that promotes healing and wellness. And if that's not present, it's the opposite. It actually creates stress that becomes toxic and makes us sick. What I want to talk about to start with is why the medical model fails so horribly to deal with chronic conditions. So the reason for that is that back about 500 years ago, this is when it really set in. It's probably a little further back than then. There was a shift in how we saw things in the Western model of thinking. And what it did is it started to use a machine metaphor to explain everything. And that's really good for certain things. But the problem is that we aren't machines. We're organic. Humans are organic. And so if you want to understand certain concepts, like anatomy or certain functions of the world, it helps to break it down into a machine metaphor. The problem is that it's just a metaphor and it actually isn't true. It's a tool for understanding, but it's not actually factually true, any more than a map represents the true territory that it's showing. So if you think about that, when you're looking at a map of the U.S., that isn't actually the U.S. It's just a representation of the U.S., fragmented down to help simplify it enough for you to make certain associations. It's no different with medicine. So modern medicine sees the body as a machine that has symptoms that are malfunctions to be fixed like broken parts. Now, the other part of this model that's incorrect is there are no parts. That's a construct. And even though it's a helpful construct, it's good to know that, okay, we say the heart. Well, is the heart really separate from the rest of the body? No, it's not. And even when you dissect the body, how you dissect it depends on your goal, but the way you dissect it will make you see the anatomy completely differently every time you dissect it. So it's not like, basically what they've took is sort of an average agreement on how things should be separate when they dissect, rather than really telling you, which is arbitrary, in other words, largely. So this model is unbelievably helpful for acute injuries. But for chronic conditions, it's an absolute, utter failure. And so if you break your arm, or you need hip replacement, or you have bullet wound, the Western model is absolutely fantastic. But if you're dealing with chronic issues, chronic pain, chronic illness, mental issues, like, severe depression, it's obvious if you take just a look at how the health is trending in the US and other parts of the world, an utter failure. Because you can't focus on isolated parts. What you need to do is to see the body and mind as a cooperative whole that's relational. So this is why I say relational healing. There's a relationship there. And by the very definition of relationship, what you're talking about is a bidirectional communication and usually at optimal, a reciprocal rhythm between things. And that's no different between us and our environment, right? So if you don't have a good rhythm with your environment, you're not going to do very well. And part of that model, basically the doctors are told these things. Don't connect emotionally with your patient. Well, if you look at polyvagal theory, Dr. Porges, he says, in his opinion, up to 50% of why someone gets well in any medical setting is the quality of connection between the practitioner and the person that they're seeing. And the reason that's true is because when we feel connected and safe, it turns on healing mechanisms in our nervous system. I'm going to say a quote from one of my new heroes, Ian McGilchrist. And here's what he says. What you find is determined by how you're looking. So I'm going to explain what that means in terms of what we're talking about here. So when you view the body as a machine, therefore the only solutions being drugs and surgery, you're not addressing the complex sort of dynamic of things like fibromyalgia, autoimmune disease, severe depression, and chronic pain. Because this is actually what's called left brain dominance. So you're only seeing how to things in parts, and you're trying to figure out what part is messed up. But that's not the problem here. The problem is the rhythm of relationship. And if you want to understand how to heal what's ailing you, it's about restoring a certain relationship between systems in yourself and the world. Because organic is a relational, as I said. And here's another, actually even a scientific basis to what I'm saying. Your body is a community, not a machine. It's not like your body is a single autonomous system. It's actually a community of cells, bacteria, so microbiota, and then the nervous system and other systems that actually have to get along to function. And they have to coexist. They have to be governed properly for things to work right. And that's also true in the ecology of our lives. We have to learn how to get along with others, which actually means to co-regulate with others. So we have to be a certain way that makes other people want to be connected to us over time. And that's how humans thrive. And if you're someone that's asynchronous, then you're pretty lonely. You don't actually know how to do that. Or maybe you don't care. But healthy people have lots of connections with people that are mutually helpful, right? So that's co-regulation. So therefore, well-being is relational, both to your body, to itself, and to everyone else in nature as well. What we have here is the conscious mind and the body as a team, optimally, right? The body is intuitive, and it should be the leader. And to be more precise, right brain, body, right? That's the part that intuits, that has a sense of the whole, that understands interconnectivity. It has compassion, that can even imagine how someone else might feel. That's empathy, right? Now, the conscious mind is ideally the detailed-oriented helper to the intuitive. So it knows how to plan things, take things apart, and investigate things. But it sucks at overview, and it doesn't have any empathy at all. And it tends to be kind of narcissistic if it's in control, because it thinks it knows, and it doesn't want to be contradicted. So while the intuitive side of us is open-minded and actually wants to be challenged in a way, help me understand things better. When we have the left brain in charge, it actually doesn't, it wants to decide and be in charge and be powerful and be in control, but it doesn't really want to be contradicted. When we're at an optimal kind of balance within ourselves, what happens is that, let me just kind of illustrate it through a little mini story. Let's say you're taking a walk on a nature trail. Let's just say you're in your body. So you're walking on a nature trail, you're aware of things, and then you see something that you don't know. Oh, what's that? Something novel. So what happens when we see a novelty is that the overview brain says to the errand brain, check that out for me. And what you do is you go from this broad focus to this narrow focus, and you examine and maybe even pursue and grasp and say, oh, what is that? And then once it's examined to your satisfaction, then you go back to the overview brain, and it's integrated into the whole. And then it becomes part of your map of how you understand the broader world. And it's this fluid sort of switching back and forth as needed. Now, here comes the caveat. When we are shocked by something, trauma, you can call it overwhelming stress if you like, what happens is it throws off this balance. And what it does is it causes your conscious mind to dominate, and the body gets stuck in survival modes. the way it sequences is that let's just imagine, let's say, an overwhelming situation. Let's say a car accident that you had nothing to do with, so you get rear-ended or something. So when that shock hits, your nervous system actually goes sometimes very quickly through this list of ways to adapt. Should I fight it off? Should I run? Should I freeze and hide? Or and if none of those work, then it says, I better play dead, and that way I might survive. So if in that car accident, this can happen in a split second, by the way, but sometimes this happens in stages. Like if you were being pursued by someone that eventually caught you, you would end up in the same place. It would just happen slower. The nervous system puts you deep into that survival mode of playing dead, which is called shutdown. It's a very low energy state. And essentially what you're feeling in your body is that you're dying, which is very unpleasant. And so the conscious mind can't tolerate it for too long. And to survive, it fragments from the body so that it actually literally cuts the body off. And what that does is it puts you in this orientation of the servant, the errand boy, being in charge, almost like a coup in a government. So you know how in governments they're like, the military has to take over because otherwise we won't survive. This is very similar, actually. So all powers are put to the military, right, or the military leader. It's the same thing in your body. And so what happens is that we have someone in charge that really shouldn't be in charge all the time. But that's what the whole system thinks is necessary for survival. And this is why when the threat goes away, we don't realize it's gone. Not in our nervous system, at least. And we have this almost like a broken marriage. So, and the marriage is actually a really good metaphor for this, because in an ideal marriage, what you have is the partners really aren't equal. What they are is complementary. And you don't want really equal, because you want complementary abilities that equal each other out and make you more effective overall, right? So that's not any different than our nervous system is the same way. So here we have the conscious mind in control, like a tyrant. And it does become a tyrant. And it's a tyrant that doesn't want to let go of power, mostly because it's afraid of the threat that it still thinks is present. And so you're either going to be hypervigilant or numbed out, or you can switch back and forth between the two. And this is a stuck state. So ideally what we want is a flow between states as necessary depending on what we're facing. For example, it's a mistake to think that you want to be calm and vulnerable all the time. That would be a terrible thing, because it means that you would be in the presence of certain threats or certain situations, and being that way is actually it's not functional. You wouldn't want to be this friendly in the same way you are with a loved one to everybody, because you're open in a way that makes you vulnerable. Some people would take advantage. This is another actually pattern of people that have trauma, is they tend not to know how to orient around people so that they keep the dangerous people away and the good people close. It's often reversed. Okay, so you're in this stuck state, even though the original threat no longer exists. And what the consequence of this is what's called nervous system dysregulation. And what that means is that you don't know how to adapt to the environment you're in, because you've got a tyrant in control who isn't very smart about the relationships of things. And the part of you that would be able to sense this is kind of like in the dungeon somewhere. This is what creates chronic stress disorders, PTSD, and so on, because we're not meant to be in that emergency state for too long. We're only meant to be there temporarily until the threat goes, and then we can come back to that balance. And here's what's happening with that divorce, or that fragmented marriage, is that the body actually keeps the score, which is the name of a really good book, by the way. What it's saying two things to the conscious mind. We need to reconnect. You need to let me back into my position. And also, we have a threat we have to figure out. When we are shocked like that and we're put into this state of fragmentation, what is recorded in the body is what I metaphorically call a dragon. So this is a mythological metaphor. So when you face that threat or that situation, you didn't figure it out. You didn't learn how to orient around it properly. And so what happened? You got burned by it. And as long as you have that burn, you're always going to be afraid of it. And it will dysregulate you every time you think of it or go towards it. And what the conscious mind does is it just ignores and suppresses, because what it doesn't want to do is to revisit that feeling it had originally that made it disconnect. So what it does instead, it'll poo-poo everything that the body wants. And there's all kinds of ways to do that. You can use drugs to numb out. You can work like crazy, 100 hours a week. You can exercise too much. You can be obsessed with Netflix instead of actually being with yourself. There's also some people space out. You even will have this dialogue in you that says, you're doing a terrible job. I don't know why you even try. God, you're stupid and ugly. Wow, you really thought you could pull that off. That's really hilarious. So it's, there's all kinds of flavors to this mind, this conscious mind that is ridiculing what the body is asking for. And then you might even blame yourself. God, it's my fault that everyone around me isn't happy. I just must be such a loser. So, okay, what's the solution to that? Well, you have to rebuild the relationship. And what that requires is the conscious mind has to turn back towards the body and allow it to at least consider talking to it at first. It's the first step, and acknowledging it, and then eventually stepping back and letting it take its proper place. To do this, it takes practices and certain therapies to restore that proper dynamic. Let me talk a little bit more about the dragon metaphor, because this is really important. That your life map, it consists of areas that have been conquered and understood, dragons, which are things that overwhelmed you that you still haven't figured out, and then unknown territory. If you want to be calm and regulated, you have to deal with the dragons. And your symptoms of distress, the pain in your body, your depression, all those things you may experience, is your body creating a symptom to get your attention and to try to motivate you towards reconnecting the mind and body properly, and then together as a team, conquering the dragons that have burned you and that are still bothering you in your subconscious. Sometimes you don't really explicitly know that, but if you actually settle down enough, you're like, yeah, I just, every time I try to ask for a raise, I freeze up. Or, if I try to get my needs met with my partner or my spouse or whoever, or my family, I find myself shutting down and being depressed. It's different for everyone, right? But you're going to see that there's these dragons that are unconquered. And the reason why I promote these practices so much is because the practices help do a number of things. One, they encourage the proper order of things, which is the body should be an intuitive leader. They help build resilience in the body as well. And we're going to talk about that a little more. And the reason why you have to do these practices is because if you face the dragon unprepared again, it's going to burn you again. And the chance of you going back one more time is not very high. So it's almost like you have to train to face the dragon. The training involves reconnecting the body and mind properly, and also actually literally fortifying yourself through exercise, diet. All these things matter, enough sleep, so that when you face the dragon, you have a chance of actually winning this time. And the dragon always has gold. The gold is wisdom, resilience, and the ability to navigate better in life. That's the gold. And then when you have that, you actually give it to you get to bring it back to the world. The people that you love, the world in general will benefit the more regulated you are. And that's actually something that Dr. Porges, the Polyvagal theory scientist, said. He goes, the best gift you can give your loved ones and the world is you being more regulated on your own steam, basically. Because it means that you add more rather than take more from situations. Now, this takes time. And this is why I just harp on about practices, because it's my belief, with no doubt in my mind, that dedicated to a daily practice of wellness, and I don't really care what you put in there to start, whatever appeals to you. For some people, it could be prayer, it could be meditation, it could be breathwork, it could be cold exposure. I've done all of those, plus many more. And I've discovered that the more tools I have in my toolbox, the more flexible I can be about using what tool is best for a certain chapter of my life or a circumstance that's coming up. You don't want to do too much at first because you can overwhelm yourself, and that's going to be counterproductive. So here's some kind of just an outline of practices that you can consider. So some practices are for listening, stillness, right? That would be journaling, meditation, prayer, or something like walking in nature, where the goal is to be quiet. And you'd be amazed when you do that, what sort of things will arise. Pieces of wisdom, certain nudging you a certain direction. But you have to make space for it. The other is the body awareness, the body scan. Some people, especially for young people, roughhousing is a really great way to get in your body. any sort of play, even board games and stuff, not always body aware, but it can be because it's very settling. Dancing, breathwork, all those are great. Yoga, Pilates, especially if they're very slow. So remember, the body needs more time to process than the mind. So the more we can slow down with awareness, the mind aware of the body, the better. And then resilience training, that could be, again, breath work for that. Certain kinds that exercise the vagal system very vigorously. Cold exposure, heat exposure, cleaning up your diet is also super helpful for that. And again, mindful yoga and things like that will also help with resilience. The ultimate goal of what we're doing is narrative rewriting. So you want to rewrite your story. And literally, when we have experiences in our lives, what happens is that when they're processed properly, which actually means that we're not overwhelmed too much, our mind turns every experience into part of our story, our narrative. And when you have a narrative that is upsetting, dysregulating, you want to rewrite that. And there are different ways to do that. All the things I mentioned so far can be that. There's also things like acting in the theater can help some people. There's a type of therapy called family constellation therapy, which is essentially being in a therapeutic setting where you have other people there to help you rewrite your relationship dynamics from the past. And then there's certain writing exercises that I've mentioned before, like Jordan Peterson's self-authoring suite, which I have done finally the whole thing. It took me a number of years to do it all. And in that writing exercise, you actually literally write out your life, write out your strengths and your weaknesses, and then write what you want to create, which I think is super helpful. And I do believe a combination of body awareness stuff and things like writing you want both. I don't think just writing is enough. I think you have to also do body awareness stuff, and possibly, like I said, if you're into theater, that can help. True healing is not a one-time insight. Right, that's a myth. It's not going to have this huge revelation. Everything shifts and you're good. It's not how it works. And part of what I've learned too that's fascinating is that positive emotion is generated not by what you would think. It's generated by movement towards a valued goal. So if you perceive yourself moving towards something valuable, something meaningful, that's what actually generates positive emotion. It's not someone telling you you're wonderful. That's okay, but that's not actually what does it. It's you, by your own conscience, moving towards something better. And the higher you aim, the better, because the goal is not to arrive. The goal is to continue to go up that spiral of better. And again, I'm going to kind of reiterate, what I think is most important is that you dedicate yourself to a practice of betterment. I actually don't think it matters that much what you start with, is that you do start, and that it's sincere. So that's what I think is most important. And then if you start and you commit, it will develop on its own to some degree. Like, in a sense, it has a life of its own, and it will start to communicate with you almost like, it's another entity. Okay, so here's what we want to do next. So let's just say that you wanted to do this process and we hadn't done what we've done before. So I'm going to kind of go through the steps here. The goal here is to get back to the body's agenda and guidance and put the conscious mind where it belongs, which is detailed problem solving. And then the body's agenda is holistic awareness and that sensing interconnectedness of life and where you should be even moving towards. So the first thing that I recommend is to do exercises like we just did to get yourself in your body. So again, what we're calling to when we do this is that the body arises as kind of the main voice of what's orienting you. It's a little hard at first. I'm not saying this is going to happen perfectly right away, but it's worth working towards. So the body scan, pendulation exercises like, the rocking and by the way, all this is on the website. There's actually a video that says grounding exercises right there. And then now that I think we're more or less in that space, so let's get the writing stuff out. The first thing to try to be aware of is, do you feel any distress in your body anywhere at all? That's a good place to start. Tightness, kind of hard. Maybe it's hard to breathe deep. There could even be pain. So if you have any active pain right now, I want to be clear about pain. People don't understand what pain is. It could be the body aching, but it could be existential pain, or a worry that doesn't go away and that bugs you. That's also pain. Depression and chronic pain, by the way, there's almost no one that doesn't have both at the same time. Or maybe you're angry. at someone, and you can feel that in your body, hopefully, at some degree. So the first thing we want to do is kind of just try to settle back in your body the best you can. Okay, just take a minute to feel your contact points on the chair. You take a couple breaths where you're aware of what it feels like to breathe. Okay. And now what I want you to do, this is your conscious mind, is to ask your body, what is it that you're wanting from me right now? You might want to write that one down. And I'm going to have you sit with this, but I want to just give you a couple before we do that. Another one could be, what are you requesting from me? Or what am I doing or not doing that is upsetting you? So let's take about 5 minutes to be with those questions, or something. You can make up your own. I'm not addicted to you following these exact words, but basically an empathetic and honest inquiry of the conscious mind to the body's knowing. And it's an invitation to reconnect. Just think of you and a spouse or a family member or a friend when there's a rift and you're saying, this is what you'd be saying is, why are you upset at me? I don't understand, or I'd like to know. It's that sort of inquire, and then the more sincere it is, the clearer the answer will be, I'll tell you. Okay, so we're going to start 5 minutes right now on this one. All right, that's 5 minutes. And I do want to add something that I didn't say before that's worth saying, is that don't necessarily expect to get a verbal answer, because what you're dealing with is the intuitive part of yourself that's going to have a sense of things. And it's not going to be necessarily an explicit printout or an email, right? It's going to say, like, if it's kind of nudging you a certain direction, like if you think about working out more, it might go, yeah, I want more of that. But sometimes people do get very clear messages too. So I'm not saying you never will. But I did want to mention something else, is that what we're doing now is covered in detail in my video called The Truth is Curative. And that's actually on the website. It's actually on the Chronic Pain Go Away column, I believe. Basically, what I say there is that it's my experience that when you're not saying, doing, and feeling and thinking things in alignment, it actually is a real indication that you are in distress. So we want to be able to hear the voice of our conscience, which is, by the way, I think what we're doing right now is that. And honor it. By the way, the conscience isn't always exactly correct, but we have to connect with that first, the voice of the body, the voice of our higher self, before we'll have any chance of moving towards something better. Otherwise, we're just not in alignment. The other thing that is important here is, what sort of attention or presence is your body wanting right now? I mean, from yourself, but it could also extend to us. But that's also another kind of question that is important, because it wants a certain kind of attention that it didn't get when the shock originally happened. That's part of what's being called forth when we have symptoms. I'm going to encourage you to do is to try to tune into the sort of attention from yourself that your body wants, because a lot of trauma is relational with people. And so what happens is that we have a shock and an overwhelm that we couldn't process at the time because there was no one else there to hold space for us in a way that was really appropriate. And so what we still want, what the nervous system still wants, is the thing it never got. And to some degree, we can't give that to ourselves 100%. You're going to have to seek out that from others. But to start with, that empathetic witness, as they like to say in the trauma healing science, is largely what is being requested from your body, from your conscious mind. It's like, I want you to actually be with me while I'm uncomfortable. Don't run away. Don't numb out. Don't make me wrong. Just like a person that you were talking to, a spouse or something. And it's through that interaction that the healing starts to happen. And the other thing is that we can't expect it to happen in 2 seconds, unfortunately. It has to be revisited. Another way to frame this, it may be easier for some of you to see it this way, is that imagine there was a dog in your presence that was hungry and it's whining or it's in pain. What are you going to do? You're going to pet it. You're going, oh, what do you need? And you give it some water. Does it need food? Maybe it needs a walk. This is the same thing we need to do for our bodies, because our bodies are very similar to a pet in its basic needs. And we tend to deny the basic needs in the pursuit of avoiding that feeling that we don't want to make contact with. So in this exercise, let's start by being aware of your body and kind of do just an awareness scan of your body and be aware of if there's any distress anywhere. That could be the tightness, numbness, something that doesn't feel optimal. And also be aware of a part of your body or a region of your body that feels either neutral or really good, like okay. It's like it's a good. And here's the exercise. First, focus on the area that feels fine. Okay, and then what I want you to do is when you breathe in, be aware of that spot or the area. And when you breathe out, try to just let go of any focus at all. So breathe in and you're aware of that area that is fine or mostly fine. And then out, just let it go. And when you're ready, let's focus on the area that feels distressed. I wouldn't choose one that's like super gnarly. Let's something that's medium. And then do the same thing where you're breathing in, be aware of it. Be with it. Don't try to run away. Breathe out. Try to let it go. Breathe in. Be with it. Be aware of it. Kind of hold it in your awareness and then let it go. Now, if you're getting distressed by being on the spot or you're just ready to switch, let's go back to the spot that feels okay. And let's do the same thing. We're going to breathe in, be aware of it. Breathe out, let it go. Breathe in, be aware. Breathe out, let it go. And in this process, notice if any sensations change as you are being with this area or the other one. And so now what we're going to do for the next 2 minutes is we're going to be aware of, we're going to go back and forth at your own pace. So remember, what we're doing is when we're on any spot, so we have the spot that's distressing and the spot that's at ease, you're going to breathe in to be aware of it, breathe out to let it go, and do as many rounds as you feel right. And then at your own pace, switch back to the other area, be aware of that, let it go, be aware of it, let it go, and then go back at your own pace. So we're going to do 2 minutes of this. It's just be at your own pace, at your own way. There's no right or wrong. It's just what feels right to you. All right, that's 2 minutes. And you don't have to rush out of what you're doing, but I want people to kind of wrap it up. This reminds me of is that anything that you're stuck with, well, I'll use an example from my own life. I used to have panic attacks when I faced my money issues. Just balancing the checkbook would send me in a total tizzy. And I tried to deal with that myself for years and just could not. So I hired a business coach that was an expert in finances. And we met every week, but every month we met and looked at the money together. And he taught me how to relate to the money. And it took about 5 years, but after 5 years, I no longer had a panic attack when I dealt with the money. And by the way, you might want to think of how it felt and try to mirror that from your conscious mind to your body in the future. That's what it's wanting. That sort of, oh, I see you're hurting. How can I help you? Even if it means, in this case, when we're dealing with shocks, even if it means that I'll have to be uncomfortable for part of it. Right? That's part of what we need to engender in ourselves to ourselves. I want to do just one more round of exercises, and it's along the same lines. So this basic exercise is from Dr. Jordan Peterson. I want to give him credit because he deserves it. It's a brilliant thing to do. So here's what I want you guys to ask yourselves right now. So this is about self-alignment specifically. What am I not doing that I should be doing? So you want to write these down. What am I not doing that I should be doing? What am I doing that I shouldn't be doing? And typically, when we ask these questions, there's one of two categories that arise. You're usually going to hear something or feel that says you need to stand up for yourself. Now, stand up for yourself against yourself would be one, because there's tyrannical elements of ourselves that perpetuate our illness. So that would be one potential, but it might actually mean standing up to someone else in your life as well, meaning speaking up. Doesn't mean the other person's wrong necessarily, but you need to speak up. Now, the other potential is that it's going to call you to face a certain part of yourself that's undeveloped and immature. So it's owning responsibility versus demanding that everything else adjusts to your comfort level. So it's typically the answer you get is one of these two categories. And if you get some other answer, that's not like you're wrong. So just go ahead and go with it. But let's take just a couple minutes to listen to the body's knowing and say, your conscience, in other words, what is it telling you about what you should stop doing or what you should be doing, and what category it stands in, whether it's standing up for what's right or standing up against yourself for your own maturity. Let's see what comes up for you. Okay, we're going to do 2 minutes. Try to finish up what you got working on right now. If you want to share reflect on what you just did, or if you have any general questions about what I've said today, something that you need clarified, please. That's the whole reason why you're here, is that, again, like I said, I couldn't do the finances without freezing up, and there was just no way out of it. Sometimes what that means is you need someone else to show you how, or hold your hand, not necessarily literally, but figuratively, so that the system can go, I just don't feel safe enough to step out that far. Maybe if someone shows me how to step out safely, I'll be willing to put a toe out, and then eventually maybe a foot, and then eventually maybe you can put the whole leg in the lake, but then eventually you can dive in. So, and we have to honor that which is true before we can move anywhere. Because, you can't bamboozle yourself into it. I've done this. Try to terrorize myself into changing. That doesn't work either. Pounding on myself, come on, you idiot. That's really going to work, right? This isn't easy stuff. It's not for the faint of heart. This is a journey that not everyone's willing to go on. And for good reason, because it's really confronting and hard at first. But I do believe that when we slay the dragons, the treasure we bring back is more than worth it. It's just that we have to trust that if we face the dragon, if we actually reconnect with ourselves and then face the dragon, then it's going to be worth the discomfort. Gave an honest answer. That's the most important first step. Where am I? I'm stuck. Okay, great. Well, that's now you know where you are on the map. You're on the, you're stuck. Okay, you know that. Instead of saying, is what we tend to do is, oh, I'm fine, or oh, I'm fine. It's like, well, you're not fine, but it doesn't mean you're wrong to be where you are either. Being truly fine means that you're witnessing where you are. So imagine you're your best friend. If you said to your best friend, I feel stuck. Oh, go on, snap out of it. You idiot. Do something else. I mean, that's not what your friend would say. So that's, again, we want to try to be with ourselves in a loving way, which in itself can be very difficult, by the way. But that is how we heal. Is we have to encourage those two to interact, and then we have to hear what they're requesting. The body mostly is what's doing that. It's saying, hey, I need some help with this. I don't know how to get through this. All right. So thank you, everyone, for today. If you found this content helpful, please like and subscribe. You can look forward to more videos about how to overcome chronic illness and chronic pain.